I think we're live, hopefully. The first few seconds, it says it's live, but sometimes it's not. So I'm just babbling to myself. Hey, everyone, good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. It's been a pretty tough night. I have really bad insomnia, so I've gotten very, very, very little sleep. I actually sleep twice a night. So I'm like one of those medieval peasants where I fall asleep around like 9 or 10 and I wake up around like 1 or 2 a.m. and then I'm up for 2 or 3 more hours. Then I fall asleep around 4 or 5 and then I wake up. But this time I didn't fall asleep at 4 or 5. So I'm kind of a mess. I am not at my sharpest today, so I'll be a little bit slow and hopefully that's not too bad. So, anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to be talking about my portfolio. Just a little bit of context. So, I used to be a designer, and the last time I worked was about 3 years ago at Boston Dynamics. I was a senior staff level designer, so I had around almost 10 years of experience at the time. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been working as a recruiter, or more specifically, a design recruiter. And it's given me a lot of perspective or context as to what I was doing wrong before. I used to think I had a decent portfolio, I was doing it right, but I had no idea what I was doing. And what's funny is that when I look at other designers' portfolio these days, I'm like, whoa, you're making all these silly mistakes that I used to make because we typically lack that perspective as a designer. We think about our portfolio from our own perspective and not the perspective from a design hiring manager or a recruiter. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to look at my old portfolio and absolutely rip it to shreds. I'm going to talk about what I was doing wrong, why I approached it this way back then, why it made sense back then, but no longer does anymore. So hopefully this will be very helpful to other people. It's going to be deeply embarrassing for me because I hate looking at my old work and it's just a lot of cringing feelings right now. So yeah, please hit up the chat. I can see your comments coming in. It's going to be deeply embarrassing for me. So feel free to just roast me, make fun of me, and all that. You can also follow my portfolio online. If you go to hangshu.com, that's my name. The password is Ultra. So I'm going to type that in Ultra. So give me 1 second. I don't know how to. Oh, wait, let me type in the comments. So it's hangshu.com. And the password is Ultra. You should be able to see the comment right now. Is it going to be uploaded anywhere? It's actually uploaded on YouTube, unfortunately. So I might delete it later. It's pretty embarrassing. This is not good for my career. Does not put me in a good light in any way. So yeah. Anyway, check out my website, hangshu.com. Password is Ultra. And judge me. I am ready for your judgment, ready to be roasted and ripped apart. So hopefully this is fun for you because it is absolutely not fun for me. So let me just get into the portfolio right off the bat. Let me talk a bit about myself. Back when I was designing, up to that point, I was senior staff level, so pretty super senior IC. I mostly worked in companies that are fairly, I would say, consider legacy companies, fairly large. The smallest company I worked at was Gemini, which at the time had around 200 people. And that's a cryptocurrency or crypto platform that was competing against Coinbase at the time. They're still around, but they're nowhere near the size of Coinbase. And I also worked at Diligent for, I think, a little bit over 2 years. I can't remember. It's been hazy. And they were about 1,000 person company at the time. I think they've since then grown to be much larger, probably like 2 or 3,000 at this point. They acquired a ton of companies. They're also private equity based or private equity owned. And prior to that, I also worked at Bloomberg, which is a very, very large company. I think tens of thousands of employees. And I worked on the product management team as a product designer. The MTA map design was a personal project that I worked on for many, many months. And what I wanted to do was to redesign the New York City MTA map, which is a passion project of mine. And I included it because you know, it's one of my favorite projects, even though it's no longer, in my opinion, a good project because I made it when I was a very junior designer. When I was starting out, it helped me land some of my first gigs. So I got a lot of sentimental value there. And the thing is, if you're looking for a job, your sentimental emotions do not matter. So that's not a good reason. Also put out a time picker for some reason. I don't know what I was thinking back then. I also included some really old projects that I worked on prior to becoming a product designer or UX designer. And I used to work on physical installations for other artists. So I would be working on like hooking up the electronics and programming some XML code, just making some art projects work. They were cool. It was like really cool work, but not super relevant to product design, unfortunately, but it's still cool nonetheless. I included it in my portfolio at the time because I wanted to show people like I had all these other interests. I'm not just a one-dimensional UX designer. And I think it's good to have it there, but maybe not in the main portfolio section because it could give people the wrong impression about what you do and who you are. And these are just really, really old projects. I included a design challenge. I used to do design challenges and thought that was a good use of my time, but I don't know why the hell I put it in my portfolio. Dumb idea. It, it it was not even a good idea to do the design challenge and then making a main portfolio piece. What was I thinking? And then a really old project I worked on for Aetna, a health insurance company. And this is just so old at this point. I think this is like the iPhone 6 that's being shown here. So no longer relevant. But anyway, let's talk about how I'm perceiving this as a recruiter. First of all, there's a password that's protecting this page. And you'll hear that a lot of recruiters are saying, don't password protect your work. And I know a lot of designers want to protect it because they want to have that kind of privacy. They don't want anyone to just look at their portfolio. And I've seen some designers put their password in their resume, which, makes sense and everything. But ultimately, what it does is it creates an added point of friction for recruiters. And a lot of recruiters they just don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. And unless your background, your LinkedIn profile, your experience is really, really strong, and so it's a really good match, they're probably not going to spend the extra time to hunt down the password if it's not readily available. Some of them don't even want to copy and paste it into the password field. So my recommendation, when you think about it, when you think about password, it's a single source of security. It's not like a login where there's a username and a password that's unique to the individual user. You don't have a login. You only have a single password, and that's being shared across the board. So what's the point of doing that? Why don't you just have a unique URL and then just turn off the scraper so that Google doesn't index the page? And then you can share that unique URL with other people. So you don't need a password. Having a unique URL that's not indexed on the search engine is really the same level of security as a password. So if I were to redo this if I were to redo my portfolio right now, I would get rid of the password and then have the portfolio be a unique URL that people wouldn't be able to guess, and then just share that directly. It's the same level of security. No one's going to be able to figure it out. And if somebody's going to share your URL, it's just as easy for them to share your password. So what's the point of doing that, right? Now, the other thing that I think I'm not doing very well here is that I'm relying too much on the logos, or like, oh, this is the work I did for Gemini. Here's what the work I did for Diligent and for Bloomberg and for the MTA map design. And the thing is, I don't have any logos in my portfolio. It's not like I worked at Airbnb or DoorDash or Google or Netflix. These are no-name companies. Why am I so proud of it? I don't know. I'm a silly goose. So if I were to redo this, I would talk about the kind of problems I'm solving, the kind of project, like what kind of project is this? You can kind of guess that for Gemini, it's a mobile app. You can guess that this is map design, that this is data visualization. So that part is good, but maybe I can talk a little bit more deeply about the kind of problems I'm solving and how that's relevant to the hiring manager. Because most hiring managers and recruiters, they're thinking about the role they're trying to fill in terms of what kind of business problem am I trying to solve? What kind of team problem am I trying to solve? And if you can talk directly to those problems, I think that would increase the interest level of the hiring manager or recruiter, which I'm not doing at all here. I'm just saying this is kind of work I'm doing, and this is research and strategy. The other thing that I'm doing here is I'm sorting it or ordering it based on recency. So this was my most recent job. Obviously now it'll be Boston Dynamics, but I haven't updated my portfolio. It's been like 5 years. I'm just like every other designer. I'm so lazy when it comes to this stuff. So update your portfolio, but also perhaps don't order it based on recency. Order it based on the kind of role you want to get. So sometimes people think about it in terms of what should I show first? The best project possible, like my most recent experience, my best experience are what? And the answer, in my opinion, should be think hard about the kind of role you're going for. Let's say you want to work in B2B or B2C, you want to work for a really large company or a small one, what kind of problems you want to solve. And then find the project that is most relevant to the role that you want to work in. And then build the portfolio around that and move that to the very top. So don't do it like what I did here, which is to focus on which one's most recent and instead focus on what's most relevant. So I think when I come in here, if I were a recruiter today, I would look at this and probably click on the role that's either the most recent or one where it has the most recognizable name or one that's the most, visually appealing, or maybe one that is most relevant to me. And it's kind of hard for me to figure that out looking at this right now. And usually you want to gently nudge the recruiter to click on the right one. You don't want them to think too hard about which one they should look at. Yeah. Do you use this portfolio? Let me just look at the questions real quick. Nicole asks, did I use this portfolio for my last job, or was it the presentation you made for the role that showcased your work? Nicole, that is a great question. So yes, this is the portfolio that I used for my last job. This is the one that landed me the senior staff position at Boston Dynamics. And the portfolio, this did its job. It got me the role. So I can't be too hard on it, but you bring up a really good point, which is technically there should be two portfolios that designers have. I know. This sounds just way too arduous or too odious for people to deal with, because not only do you need to have one portfolio, one good one, but you need to have two. And the reason why you need two is that they serve very different functions. There's a portfolio that you share with recruiters, that you put in your job application, that hiring managers and recruiters look at initially when they try to decide if they want to interview you or not. And you're not there. The designer is not there to present the work. You are not there to talk about it, to provide guidance. They are just looking at it on their own. They might look at it for 5 seconds or 10 minutes. It's entirely up to them. They can click on the wrong things. You have no control or no power over this. And that's the portfolio that's supposed to get you your first or second round interview. And that's what this is right now. That's what I'm reviewing. The second portfolio that you should have is a slide deck. One on either Google Slides or Figma Slides, whatever it is, or even PowerPoint, doesn't matter, or PDF. And it shouldn't be an up and down scrolling website. It should be a left to right sort of slide deck. And that one is the one that you use in your final round interview. The one where it's like 3 or 4 hours long minimum. You're on site and you're presenting it in person, and you have 20 minutes to do that. So the main difference is that one, this sounds kind of silly, but one is up and down, and that's the initial portfolio. The other one is left to right, sort of slide deck. And this one, I am not here to present it normally. Somebody is clicking into it and looking around on their own time. There's no support. And the other one is a slide deck where the designer or the candidate is presenting in person. So the slide deck is typically a lot less wordy. There's not going to be a ton of text in there. It's just going to be some phrases, some keywords that I would put in to remind myself of what I'm going to be talking about, how I'm presenting it. And this one, on the other hand, is a lot wordier and is going to have a lot more text that somebody can read through. So, by the way, this text is way too small, and this I'll get into my issues with this in a moment. But so this is the initial presentation. This is the initial deck. This is not the presentation for the role that showcased my work. I hope that is clear. So again, two portfolios. One that gets you the interview, and that's going to be an up and down website. And the second portfolio is a slide deck that's going to help you get the job offer. And that's the one that you present. John says, if I were hiring, I would appreciate seeing that for sure, but def at the bottom. Yeah. To send around password protected PDFs, and recruiters and their hiring managers hated it. Yeah. So don't do that. Just send it. I don't understand why people send a password and like a PDF file or a website when if somebody is hell bent on sharing your protected work, all they have to do is include the password too. It's not like if you're going to share the URL, sharing the password is not that much harder. So anyway, remember that the job market right now is so bad for candidates. In 2021, when it was much better for there was just very little talent available on the market, but there were all these roles available. Back then, recruiters did a ton more work. Like recruiters would chase people down, would get on calls with them all the time, and just basically beg designers to please, interview with us. We are looking for talent, any talent. And that's no longer the case. And unfortunately, the interview process or the hiring process is really a game of power dynamics. Whichever side has more power will move all the really, I just want to say it's really just the work onto the other side. So if recruiters have more power like they do right now, they'll typically move the work of validating the fit. Is this the right fit for us, between us? They'll move it to the other side. And when it's the opposite, then the candidates will push the work onto the recruiter side. So one thing you'll notice is that right now you're going to see a ton more take-home design exercises that are totally unpaid. And that's on the rise right now. That's indisputable because recruiters and hiring managers are basically pushing the work of validating the fit onto the candidate. It's like, I want you to spend 5 to 10 hours on a design exercise, and I'm going to spend 10 minutes reading it. So it's a pretty good ratio for the hiring manager. And then back in 2021, when hiring was, off the chart, there were pretty much no design take-home exercises. You wouldn't be able to get any interviews back then. Unique URL for WordPress site. It's, well, what do you mean unique URL, right? You can use any URL. Just name the page anything you like, and then just don't put a link to it. Like right now, I have a link to my portfolio when you go to my homepage, and just remove that. Just instead of calling it portfolio, have the URL be Hang's shitty, ugly old work. Nobody's gonna guess that, and then you can share that. You just don't put the link there. And it's not a unique URL. It's just a URL that is not being indexed in the search engine, and it's not available on the menu. I hope that is clear. If it's not, I'll try to explain or just comment. So you can customize just Haas logo up on the homepage. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I would give anything to not have NDAs for so much of my work. Talk to employment attorney I have to help get some language. To employ myself, blah, blah, blah. So many easy answer addresses user friction, breaches of contracts, and the like. So why am I comfortable showing all this stuff? So, this is my personal work. These are artist works. And this is just so old at this point. This is more than 5 years old. These are all over 5 years old. The Gemini app no longer looks this way at all. So there's really nothing that protects. There's nothing worth protecting over here. But if you do have a recent work that is under NDA, I don't think it's that hard to get around it. All you have to do is to block out key information. It's not like for example, for Diligent, one of our goals was to get 30% year-over-year growth. And I'm not super sure if I'm allowed to share that, but I could easily have just said, it's the year over year growth is X amount or 20%. And then I put an asterisk next to it and say that, I'm hiding that information or I'm changing it for NDA purposes. But it doesn't really matter to the hiring manager or recruiter because I don't care that, like, what percentage or what the main data is doesn't really influence my view of you as a designer. It's just I just need to understand how are you approaching these problems. The raw numbers are irrelevant, to be honest. It's not like there's a difference between 30% versus 20%. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, if there is some kind of like NDA in terms of what the work looks like, then maybe you just have to spend a few more hours to make the UI look different so that it's no longer the same app in many ways. So for example, if this app were under NDA at the time, then I might just go back in here and then change the colors and then change some of the words so that it's a different looking app altogether. And instead of calling it Gemini, I'm going to call it Taurus or Scorpio, whatever. It doesn't really matter, and it doesn't change how the recruiter or the hiring manager looks at this work. It's not like if the name is off, I'm going to think, okay, you're not a good designer, I'm not going to hire you. It's just a matter of, can I show this information or not? And does the actual name really matter here? The company won't do shit if they found out you shared something. It's not worth it legally to pursue. Yeah, I would agree with that. To be specific, to be fair though, there are certain companies that do care. So that mouse company, Disney, they absolutely do care. So I'd be very careful about this if you're working for a very large company that has a history of going after people over content like this. Mihal asks, how much portfolio customization, if at all, did you do tailoring to specific roles? I didn't at the time. I didn't at all because I was silly. I didn't know better. Nowadays, given the current market, I wouldn't tailor it to every single company. I would think really hard and long about what kind of role I'm going for, and then make my portfolio very much tailored around that specific role. And I think the issue is that a lot of designers are trying to pump up their response rate when they apply to jobs or reach out to recruiters. Their goal is to send out 20 applications and get 20 responses. And to me, that is unrealistic, and that's vanity metrics. The goal is not to land as many interviews as possible. The goal is to get a job offer that is good for you. And you're going to have much more luck getting a job that you are targeting and you're putting a lot of effort around versus trying to make a portfolio that is a good hit for all the jobs out there. The reality is that given the current market, most hiring managers and recruiters, they're trying to find a very specific match. So for example, if I'm recruiting for a healthcare company, they're most likely going to ask for somebody with prior healthcare experience because they believe that somebody who understands HIPAA compliance, somebody who understands the rigors of working in the healthcare space and the legalities of it and all that is extremely important. And because the market is such as it is right now, they feel that they have the right or the luxury to ask for something very specific. Now, back in 2021, recruiters and hiring managers were more open. They were more willing to take risks and chances on people. They might say, well, the market is really, there's not a ton of talent out there and we definitely need someone, yesterday. Maybe we're okay with hiring somebody from the banking industry for this healthcare role because in the banking industry there are a ton of regulations and maybe this person is good enough with complexity and legalities that they are able to pick this up really quickly. So their approach and the openness to taking that kind of risk is very different between then and now. Doing the pitch text. Okay, I think that the second portfolio would be single UX case deck or maybe two, right? Yeah. It would be one or two. It depends on the interviewer. Some companies ask for one case study, some ask for two. I typically would prepare two, one really good one and a secondary one to really support any perceived weaknesses that you might have for the first one. So I might have one deck that's really focused on research and strategy, and then another deck that's really focused on B2C visual design work. Now, ideally, you have one project that really showcases your entire spectrum of skills in a single project, but I understand that's not always possible. Strange, we're going to have blah, 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 blah. Yep. How long and detailed should each case study be? Is there a teaser for more detailed slide presentation? Should it include everything to ensure the recruiter can check all the boxes? I hate to say this, Chris, but I don't think recruiters really have complex checkboxes to tick off. They're just going off by gut feeling. So you don't really spend that much time in a case study. Like I'm gonna act like a recruiter looking at a portfolio piece. So first thing I look at this like, holy shit, the font is way too small, whatever. Okay, this looks all right. The visual design's it's all right. It's a little sparse. This person has a clean look and feel. They look like they have some experience designing for iOS and for mobile platforms, and they can do some kind of trading platform. Great. There's a Trello deck. I don't understand why there's Trello board here. Okay, whatever. Cool. They know how to make a prototype. Okay, all right. And this is what it looks like in Figma. Cool. And this is when back then when we used to have to spell out exactly what the pixel widths and everything is. Like nowadays you don't have to do that anymore because Figma is so much better. All right, that's pretty much it. Like I'm probably not gonna read a whole lot. I'm just gonna eyeball it and go by gut feeling. And right now as a recruiter, I'm saying this is pretty meh. Probably not gonna say yes, and that's it. And I'm gonna look over to some other work. It's like, okay, this looks a little bit dated. All right, so this person probably can deal with complexity, has worked in finance, crypto, does some research and strategy stuff. They could do some map design, a little bit of iOS, but looks like most of it is like web stuff. So is this the right fit for my role? Maybe, maybe not, but that's pretty much it. It's not as comprehensive as you would like. Most designers assume that recruiters and hiring managers are very comprehensive in terms of how they evaluate and look at people's portfolios. And the reality is it's just not like that. It's very much a gut feeling. You spend, 5-10 seconds and you get a good idea of do you want to proceed with this candidate or not. And right now, looking at this, it's like probably not, no. And I'm being generous and gentle here on my poor soul. How much is it? Is too much to show in a case study? Is it good to put more emphasis on research versus design concepts and ideas? I think information should be skimmable. You shouldn't go too deeply into processes. You want to talk about the kind of problems that you want to solve. And that's, we can go a little bit deeper into that. What's your take on general topics of describing design impact in portfolio? So it depends on what you mean by design impact. So I think of it in terms of business impact typically. When you talk about design impact, I think of things like how you change the design processes or the design team in some ways, or you change the way designers work with product managers or with executives. So our maybe design impact is like how did design impact the business? If I have metrics, I would try to talk about that. I think that's always helpful, but the metrics should have some kind of context behind it. So if you say something like, I know we improved onboarding rates by 30%, like what does that really mean, right? It's kind of irrelevant. But I remember talking to recently a content designer from Walmart, and the metrics that she talked about in portfolio really, to me, wasn't that impressive until she mentioned casually that her design was being used by literally hundreds of millions of users on the Walmart website. And I thought, that's not really a design metrics per se, but it's showing that her work is so important that it's being shown to such a wide and large audience that she is shipping at scale. And I thought that data was really important, and you should definitely put it up front in your portfolio and say, I am shipping, or I'm designing for products that are being used by hundreds of millions of users. And I think that's the important thing to put in. Am I streaming this to YouTube? I think so, yeah. So you can find me on YouTube. Maybe the quality is a little bit better than LinkedIn Live. Gemini designs will get me to consider you, but I want to see one more modern plus polished item. That's very generous of you, John, but I would say no. I wouldn't. It's not good enough, in my opinion. Design impact on business. So I think that's important. It depends on the role. So there are hiring managers out there right now who are thinking about how their team can better impact the business goals at the company, and they want they want to hire a designer who has experience of having done that in the past. However, in my experience as a recruiter, I feel like most hiring managers right now are looking for craft as opposed to business impact, and they're really looking for people with really good taste or the ability to ship products at scale at a high speed and of a very high craft quality. And that's the reason why I think this portfolio right now is pretty lacking. Susan asked, if you were recruiting for founding designer versus non-founding designer versus design leader, how would your thought process change while reviewing this portfolio? What different hard skills would you evaluate? So that's a great question. These are very different roles. So founding designers, I would typically look at their LinkedIn first and see if they have experience working at very early stage startups as a sole designer or like an early design team, very small one. And if they have that, then I would typically look in their portfolio and see if they have very high craft skills. So the reason for this is that even though I don't think craft is really that important, in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, which doesn't really matter, but I don't think craft skills is super important for early stage startups, because early stage startups are not making or breaking it because of visual polish. Like there are way bigger issues they're facing, like their strategy or product market fit. And I don't think visual design really has that much of an impact on product market fit. So that's just my opinion. Now, with that said, I do believe that the vast majority of founders out there really care about visual craft. They don't see it this way. They see design as a differentiator because they feel that, most of the problems out there are being solved by existing products and solutions. And you're not going to be able to stand out unless your product is super polished and looks way more professional than other products out there. So having a designer on staff who is extremely, craft oriented would give you the leg up, so that to differentiate your product in the market versus other products, because your product looks more legit, and that's super valuable, which I agree with, but I don't think it's as important as founders typically make it out to be. But, I don't hire designers. I recruit for them. And I think founders and how they think is typically more important, even if, in my opinion, it's not 100% accurate or correct. So founding designers, definitely more craft, more visually oriented. They need to be somebody who can hold their own, can communicate well with founders, can push back, and really provide thinking around their decision making. But mainly in the portfolio, I need to see a lot of visual design work. So looking at this, am I a founding designer? Probably not. But I don't think the visual polish is there yet. Now, non-founding designers, typically of a larger team, I would probably, this portfolio would be a stronger fit for that. And I think in those roles, it's visual polish matters a little bit less, in my opinion, and more so around when you look at a LinkedIn profile, do they have experience working in larger companies that are not agencies? Have they shipped the product end to end? Not 0 to 1, but done the entire breadth of the work from ideation to strategy work to user research, all the way to creating the the wireframes and the visual designs, the handoff to developers, and then follow up and measure the impact so that they can iterate on it. And I think that's that's hard to measure or hard to figure out in portfolios, but you can guess that looking at how many years they've worked at other companies that are similar to the large company that you're recruiting for. Now, design leaders, that's a very broad term. So I'm going to assume this is typically like, say, design directors or senior managers. What do their portfolios look like? That's a great question. I actually don't know. That's a question that I've been asking other design directors for a while now. I think Michal, I think you're a director, so you probably have more context around this than I do. And same with Nicole Landry in this. Your portfolios typically should look pretty different than a senior IC's portfolio like mine. So hopefully you folks can talk a bit more about that. What different hard skills would you evaluate? So again, visual design for founding designers, strategy and stakeholder management, communication for non-founding designers and design leaders. I have no idea. I'm not a design leader, and I don't recruit for them either, unfortunately. Okay. I wonder if you generalist portfolio, mix of research and design projects. I'd be mostly you're being super specific. Okay, so great question. I'm going to give you some hard truth here. I mean, hard to hear, hard to take in, but recruiters don't work with early career designers because, especially external recruiters like me, I think internal recruiters definitely, there are definitely internal recruiters whose role is targeting recent grads and university students are early career junior designer roles. And these internal recruiters typically are very well trained, and they focus on how to evaluate designers who don't have real world projects in their portfolio. So they have their own process. I don't do that, but I typically, if I were a junior designer, I would not bother reaching out to external agency recruiters like me unless it is to seek advice, because we just don't hire for junior designers. It's just not part of our it is not part of our business. These companies are not going to pay us the recruiting fees to hire a junior designer because it's just so easy to find them right now. How do you make an early entry portfolio stand out when you don't have to write everything in a case study? You can totally write anything in the case study. I think for junior designers, it's going to be a lot of visual design craft, unfortunately, because most of the time you don't really have any established experience working in the company. So I wouldn't expect you to be able to talk about how you ship the product and worked with a team of developers. Most likely you haven't. So it's going to be more about imaginary or non-real projects. And in those cases, it's very much going to be evaluating you based on your hard skills. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, this not director, but I think Snowflake is a pretty big company in that even if you're not a director, you would be considered director at smaller companies in many ways. So usually share org impact, team on blocking, impact on business, growth of the team, ICs and managers. Yeah, that makes sense. Hour it takes. Okay, cool. Hey, Terrence. I can't see who it is until I look at the URL. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I hope this video will inspire others to share their portfolios, because we're always putting it under lock and key because it's just so embarrassing sometimes. So hopefully this inspire others to embarrass themselves like I am doing right now. So anyway, I think I've gone on too long about the Q&A. Let me just dive into the portfolios. So yeah, how would I approach all this? I would probably talk about the problems I'm solving for each of these instead of just showing the logos and the an image like this. I think images are good, but maybe talk a little bit more about the kind of role that I'm going for, and also my unique value proposition, and also the kind of problems I'm solving right now. So one thing that I often see on other people's portfolios is that they spend a lot of room, or a lot of the page is taken up by their name. And as a recruiter, when I come to your webpage, I already know who you are. Like I wouldn't be clicking on it unless I know who you are and I'm interested in your candidacy. So when I go into your page, I don't need to know your name. I just need to know what kind of designer you are, what kind of unique value proposition are you able to offer. And right now, I don't talk about that at all. I should be saying a bit about my background, my experience. I can talk about how I have about a decade worth of experience. I worked in a wide range of areas like robotics, crypto, finance, and map design, and and I think all that would be extremely important to put over here and just write it out so that people have a general idea of who I am. So this is my most recent work in my portfolio. I put it into Figma file, which is not a great idea. Figma's a lot better now, and also I think almost everyone is used to Figma, or they're used to opening up Figma and navigating around. And back then, a lot of times my hiring manager was a PM, and they weren't really familiar with Figma yet, so I was getting complaints and feedback that I should be moving my portfolio outside of Figma. It shouldn't be a Figma file. And I should have taken that advice, but I was really stubborn back then, even though now it's less of an issue. So, what did I do wrong here? Um, you'll notice that when I link to this, there are all these tabs that takes up a lot of space on the left and right hand side, and not everybody knows how to turn them off. So that's an issue that you should make your work as appetizing and appealing as possible right off the bat. You shouldn't be making people jump through hoops like that. So I basically laid everything out from left to right. I talk about my role, about the company, which I thought was important because Diligent, while it's a very large and impactful company, it's not well known. It's actually one of the 20th largest software as a service company in the world. So it's quite large in terms of revenue, I believe. But most people haven't heard of it. So I do think it's important to talk a bit about what the company does, why it's important, why it's impressive that I work there or whatever. By the way, so if you're not familiar with Diligent, they are a board governance software company. So board of directors, people, those 80-year-olds who used to be CEOs or C-levels, and after they've retired, they become board of directors somewhere. They use a software called Diligent to review the board material on a quarterly basis. So it's basically a very fancy and highly secure PDF reader. And that's what the tool is. So I explain that here, and then I talk about some of the objectives. One challenge that came out of this, well, see, this is annoying. I really should have locked everything down in the file so that when people hover over it, it wouldn't have these annoying blue lines around it. So quality of life, super important for your portfolio. This shouldn't be happening, especially in a tough market like now. So anyway, we had a really tough ask by the business, which is to achieve 30% year-over-year growth. And this is really due to the fact that we are private equity owned. I have my thoughts around PE, but I'm sure, just read up on private equity and what they do to companies. Looking back, I actually think this is a fairly compelling challenge. This is something that a lot of companies are facing nowadays, which is you have to hit these business goals. And the issue with Diligent was that they had been growing by leaps and bounds of 30% year over year, but it got to a point where it was getting a lot tougher. They had really saturated the market, and they were doing whatever they can to juice the numbers. So it would be things like, raising the prices or hiring more salespeople. These are non-sustainable methods of pumping up your revenue. So my goal as a designer was to figure out how we can change our product so that we can still grow organically at a high clip. And I talk a little bit about this here, but so looking at all this, the issue is that while I broke out the themes or the chapters of this, none of the information here is really skimmable. Worse, none of the information here looks good. So right off the bat, you're looking at this and you're like, what kind of designer is this person? If I didn't know myself, I would assume this person is a design strategist. Somebody who doesn't know how to do visual design, which is true. My visual design skills suck. And I'm definitely not doing myself any favors by showcasing this here and also at the very end. So what you should be doing, if I were to redo this, is to talk about the problem really early on so that the recruiter can make the judgment of, is this case study relevant to me and the role that I'm hiring for? Because if it's not, then maybe I'll lose interest in it. So I definitely want to highlight that. And the second thing I want to do is to talk about my solution, which I've basically hidden all the way down here because unfortunately the solution is really not that pretty or good looking. But I can at least talk about it, and I'm just not doing that here very well. The other thing is that I'm not really showcasing my visual design skills, which is highly important in the current market. So these three things, right? Problem, solution, and the complexity and the challenges of the solution, and also the visual design skills, the wow factor. All these three things have to be there for a good portfolio, which I am not doing at all. So the other thing I also want to mention is that when it comes to solutions, not all solutions are equal. Even if it fixes the problem, there are different levels of complexity when it comes to problems and solutions. You want to explain the solution or the problem in such a way that it's understandable, it's something that people can relate to, but they also need to understand just how tough it was for you to solve it. Because if you showcase a really easy problem, a really easy solution, then that's not impressive. That's like something that any junior designer can do. So if I'm saying I'm a lead or staff level designer, I need to really talk about some high level, complex business level problem that I'm able to solve through design, because that is then showcasing my seniority, my experience, and I'm just not doing that here. So to really shortcut this, what I did here was to show, this is what the app used to look like. And the app is basically a bunch of PDFs that people can click into and then read through their books and then take some notes, highlight some stuff, and that's it. This is very much an efficiency-based software. So it's very much like a tax accounting software. You don't use it unless you have to, right? You have to get this jobs to be done thing finished. And once it's done, then you don't use it anymore. And that's basically my theory here, which is board meetings happen quarterly. So every, 4 times a year, our usage rates would go up right before the end of the quarter. And then as soon as the quarter was over, it would drop to almost zero because there's no reason for you to go back into the app anymore. It's similar to tax accounting software. So if you live in the United States, you do your taxes in March or April of the year, and then you're not going to use TurboTax in May or June. Like, why would you do that? You're not going to use it until, early next year. So I looked at TurboTax and these other accounting software companies, and what I noticed was that they realized you could only charge people so much money to do your taxes. You can charge them maybe $500, but any more than that, then it's just not worth it. You're going to run into competition, and also nobody really wants to pay that much money for taxes. So I see these companies acquiring other related software companies. So several years ago, one of these companies acquired Mint, which is a finance tracking software, which makes sense. Like, you should be able to track your finances and then have that go into tax data, right? So if you acquire these companies, then your usage rates would theoretically go up because now people are using Mint and other related software outside of the tax season. So my thinking is that this is a desired pattern that you want, where it's kind of even keel throughout the year. So we had to fill out the valley somehow. So how do we get more engagement during the valleys? And the issue is that whenever we build a new feature for this tool, which is to help people read their board books 4 times a year, their engagement will come at the peak. And the more we worked on it, the less the gains were. Because in the beginning, when you build out new features, you would get a lot of engagement. But then as you made it better and more cohesive, there's a diminishing return on investment, basically. And that meant the way we were approaching feature building was completely wrong, in my opinion, because you're just going to get very little return instead. So how do we shift from building efficiency-based features, which is like doing your taxes, over to efficacy-focused features, which is something like Mint, where you are now building new habits that are outside of the tax season. So how do we get, the engagement over there? And I went into it by looking at the object relationship map, which is like all the different types of features and tools that we had within the broad ecosystem of the company. And I saw that, the company boards, the calendars, they were all linked in some way. But everything ultimately was connected by these two things, the board meeting and the company board. And everything kind of was based around that, which is the 4 times a year board meeting. So, I won't bore all of you with this, but, I did a ton of research, talked to a lot of board directors, and realized that in order for us to increase user engagement, we had to build around the user as opposed to the company board. So we had to kind of rethink how this product would function from an information architecture perspective, and also what kind of features we should be building. So talking about how to more effectively read board books, we should be thinking about the needs and wants of the average board director and try to cater to that. So it might be a networking tool, it might be some way to look at the market analytics so that they can keep track of things even outside of the board cycle. So yeah, piece of advice. You should tell a story by itself. Treating it as a longer storytelling arc may help. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. This is not a good story for me to tell. I think, when I talk it out, I think it makes sense. I can give more details. I can give answers, have a conversation. It's okay. But as a standalone deck or a portfolio, this absolutely fails. This is a terrible portfolio in that standpoint. Just by design, not, we actually have very low standards in that sense. Like design wasn't expected to fulfill these promises, product was. And the issue is when you don't have these high standards, when you don't have these really big asks, and your skin is not in the game, it also means that you don't have much power. You're not really listened to in the organization. That's kind of the issue that I was facing. Like I'm used to having more clout or having the ability to change the way we do things, having the ability to make large or complex decisions, and I just didn't have it there. So my goal was to really try to get some skin in the game. Like I want to be in an environment where I'm allowed to fail and I have to pay the price. Like if I screw up, I want to get fired. I'm okay with that. I'm confident in my own ability to get a job again. So I want to take risks, and that company wasn't it, unfortunately. So I was trying to build this infrastructure around me so that I could take that kind of risk, so I can, put myself out there and possibly fail. So my goal through doing this project was to put design at the front and center of the company and say, we can help you hit your crazy ambitious goals of 30% year-over-year growth, and this is how we're going to do it through design. And I think we were a little bit successful in doing that. It was slow, very slow though. Yeah, so we never got to execute on this. I did get funding approved for this project, but I didn't stay long enough to really finish it. I think this would have been like a 5-year long project. I was only there for less than 3 years, I believe. Yeah, this is more of a left-right portfolio you were talking about. Absolutely. So anyway, feel free to jump into it, but I think it's pretty clear why this portfolio piece is not great. It has some good storylines in it, but it's not able to really grab people's attention right off the bat. And it's not really showcasing my unique value proposition effectively. It's not communicating it. It's an issue similar to that saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, did it really fall? And this is the issue. I think there's a good storyline in it, but I absolutely failed in telling it. So if you're not willing to invest, like say, to be honest, probably 20 minutes to read through this bit by bit, you're not going to see why this is an impressive piece, in my opinion. And no design hiring manager or recruiter is going to spend 20 minutes to read something this text heavy. So this is an issue of hubris on my end, where I assume as a designer, whatever I make, people are just going to read. That's not the case at all. I'm an idiot. Yeah, that's kind of my attitude when it comes to that's my attitude when it comes to being a designer. And I think that is both good and bad. It lets me take risks, but I've been fired before. And that's the cost of doing business, in my opinion. You got to be able to take risks. Otherwise, you're going to be a designer who just, does things whatever people tell you to do, and you just do it. All right, next on to the next piece. If anybody has any questions about diligent piece, let me know. I can answer it. But I would give this a rating of something like a 2 out of 10. It's compelling, but only if you invest time in it, and that's a big caveat. This one, I think. Hold on, I gotta blow my. Yeah, whenever I talk too much, I just get really congested for some reason. It's like a weird, like, body issue I have. Yeah, too long didn't read section. I think that'd be really important. I should have done that, but there are just so many different ways I could have improved on that portfolio piece. So if I were to redo it, it'll be completely different. It wouldn't be a Figma file. I would be talking more about how did I reposition the design team in the eyes of executive stakeholders in such a way that design was elevated. It was seen as more valuable than just a bunch of pairs of hands like service providers. Like I want design to be seen as strategic leaders, if not partners. So I would probably talk about it from that standpoint. And I would talk about how we had these crazy ambitious goals of 30% year over year growth. And this would be a massive shift in how the product would be, built or sold to the customer. And I think that's way more compelling to people if I were to position it that way versus here's a bunch of weird diagrams to look at and, shit ton of text for you to read. Like who has time for that? Deductive is putting the point first and adding detail. Inductive telling story from beginning to end. Which do you recommend a portfolio? Ooh, definitely not inductive. I would say deductive 100%. Yeah. You gotta be able to tell this story in a way that is compelling to people within 20 seconds. Because obviously, if your portfolio is good, nobody's gonna look at it for only 20 seconds, but you gotta be able to grab their attention within the first 20 seconds. And none of my portfolio pieces is doing that, unfortunately. So to be honest, I think even back then my portfolio was junk. I just didn't realize it. And no recruiter sat me down or hiring manager sat me down. It's like, Hang, your portfolio sucks ass. Your portfolio is like here, and your actual skill levels might be over here. And that's just tragic, right? Because ideally you want that to be even. Because if your portfolio is much better than your abilities, then you're not going to be able to deliver once you get into the role. Like I always felt like I was getting these roles, but I was over delivering, like I was being underpaid in a way. And I had a hard time selling people on my unique skill sets. So that's just tragic. I really should have spent more time and really gotten more feedback from people and really listened more because I was just not listening to people at the time. I felt like I knew better or knew more. And that's just it's sad. So yeah, I do highly recommend people to find a good design recruiter and really get them to sit them down and just like really walk through your portfolio, not just do like a regular, quick overview, quick feedback session. Like really ask why they feel this way, why they're looking at it this way. I didn't realize it until I became a recruiter. I'm like, okay, this is how I'm operating in the interest of time and getting my job done. And this is exactly why recruiters were rejecting me early on because I wasn't thinking about it from their perspective. And it's so deeply ironic that designers, are always pushing for more user research and understanding the users. And, you are not the user. And, we say shit like that, but when it comes when chips are down, we don't actually follow it. We don't actually think about ourselves as, products, and we don't talk to the users enough. Like we do somewhat, but we don't truly talk to the users. And when we do talk to recruiters and hiring managers, it's always in the process of getting hired by them, which is a terrible idea because it's basically the same as a salesperson trying to do user research during a sales call. Like the power dynamics are way off and the positioning is way off. It's like buy my product, but by the way, tell me, what you really feel about this product, but buy it, right? Doesn't make any sense. So it's the same as, during the interview process, you're like, hire me, but also give me good feedback. So ideally, you talk to a design recruiter outside of that cycle, somebody who doesn't have any roles you're applying for. And maybe you have to pay them for like an hour of their time, but really get them to sit down and just like level with you. Like, I wish I did that early on so that I didn't make the same kind of mistakes that I made back then. So yeah, this could have all been avoided. Yeah, it's true. It's really hard to get feedback. Mostly because there are legality reasons. Nobody wants to get sued. Also, when you give negative feedback, people take it really poorly. Like, I think like I've been a designer, so I know what it's like to be a candidate. I feel like we can at least share that common ground. And I've given feedback, and people have taken it poorly. And I get it. I'm pretty direct, but I'm just as harsh on on myself as I am on other people. And actually, I'm like probably more filtered with other people. But even then, it's like it's hard. It's hard to get feedback, and I think a lot of people say they want feedback, but they don't actually want it, not in the way that it's going to be delivered. And I was one of those people. I think if I really got feedback back then, I don't know if I would react well to it. Like if somebody like me right now sat me down 5, 6 years ago and like really gave me the feedback I'm giving right now, I'd be like, oh, you don't know shit. Like I just ton of hubris. How much value does showing breadth in portfolio positioning provide beyond the specific focus of the target job? Is a value add or detractor? It's hard to answer that. It's a case by case basis. I would say really right now, really know the role you're going for. Really know it. And then really know about what they care about and how they are evaluating you. And just do that exactly. Don't try to get too fancy because people get confused very easily. I feel like hiring managers and recruiters just don't have imagination sometimes. Like they can't really see how, if you're really good at this thing, conversely speaking, you should also be good at this other thing because your ability to comprehend complex subject matters is transferable, but people don't really think of it this way. And Matt is fucking laughing at me. Great. I love you too, Matt. It's true. I mean, I'm saying stupid shit right now. There's never a perfect portfolio. Yeah, there's no perfect portfolio. And the other thing I want to caveat is that every recruiter has opinions, and these opinions are often very different. So if there are definitely a lot more successful recruiters than I am out there who are going to contradict me, and that's fine. And I think that happens quite often. So my advice, which is I'm going to steal from the venerable Amy Miller, who's a really great recruiter at Amazon. Please follow her. Her advice on this to me is absolutely spot on, which is listen to the people who are hiring for the jobs that you want. And that's it. You don't have to care about, are they logical or, are they smart? It doesn't really matter. If you want a job at Amazon, then you will listen to an Amazon recruiter. Makes sense, right? So do that. And if you want a job at an early stage startup as a founding designer, then talk to a recruiter that hires founding designers or talk to founders. It's that simple. Don't listen to some design leader who's like, oh, we should do hiring this way. Like this is my biggest pet peeve. Whenever I talk about hiring on LinkedIn and I talk about how fucked up it is and how like this is so illogical or whatever, inevitably some big shot hiring manager comes in and it's like, well, I do hiring this way and so much better than this like crap you're talking about. You shouldn't be doing it this way. You should be doing it my way because my way is way more effective. I've hired 20 people and they've all been extremely successful, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I bet you're a better hiring manager than I am. 100%. I'm not even going to debate you on that. But you're in the minority here. Like most hiring processes are not as good as the way you make it out to be. And the reality is entirely different. So if you happen to have a role open right now and I'm a candidate, then yeah, I'll listen to you. But if you don't have any roles open and I'm going for these other jobs that are entirely different than yours and the hiring process is different, then I'm sorry, I'm going to listen to that. So So that's my take on it. Anyway, so the funny thing is that when I made this portfolio for Gemini, I I've been following the bootcamp format, which is like talk about your process, talk about the wireframes and the information architecture and the kind of work that you were doing, and I show your work and stuff. And to be honest, it's not a good idea. I maybe it's good as like filler information, but it shouldn't be highlighted front and center like I did here. And and keep in mind that all this is like super outdated. Like back then, showcasing your ability to really spec out the pixels and like give very detailed information to developers, that was super important. But all of this is pretty much automated nowadays, so that's no longer relevant. So, um, what would I do with this project? I would probably deprecate it. I wouldn't be showing it. I might, if I put in my portfolio, I would not show any of this. I might just show something like this, and I would talk about some of the key metrics. Like, we got 4.5 star ratings on the App Store. We built this in 3 months, and it was successful in the sense that we were able to meet the crazy deadline, and it did well in the market, something like that, and just leave it at that. I think it's okay to for your online portfolio to just have some spare images and also a quick description of what it was, so that people get an idea that you worked at this company. You have some logos in your resume. Now, I don't recommend you do this for every single one of your portfolio pieces, but you should have at least one or two more detailed pieces that people can look into. But for really old projects from like 6, 7, 8 years ago, it's just that things have moved on and changed so much that showcasing it doesn't really do you a ton of favors. I mean, showcasing all the little minutia, the minor details, isn't going to do you a ton of favors. Like nobody wants to see an iPhone 6. Okay, not anymore. Sorry, guys. Uh, Instead, you should just show that, hey, I worked there. Here's the overarching, description, the storyline, and that's it. Maybe one paragraph, a few screenshots, and that's it. Don't go into nitty gritty. It's not going to do you any favors, in my opinion. Yeah, they don't read your thesis. They don't got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Do hiring managers care if the resume is fancy or basic design, ATS friendly format? Oh, god damn it. This is such a deep topic. Depends. So some hiring managers care, some don't. I would say recruiters, some will care, some won't. The most important thing is that your resume is parsable, as in when you upload it to Workday or some other software, the information that's in it is able to be matched to the correct field. So your first name matches to the first name field. Your company name matches the company names field. I think all that's really important because that saves time. Um, so make sure it's ATS friendly in the sense that it's parsable, but don't go overboard because I hear a lot of how people are talking about the ATS auto rejecting people because the keywords aren't there. That's not true at all. ATSs are basically what are they? They're just databases. They're like a filing cabinet that stores information. It doesn't automatically reject people except for knockout questions. So what are knockout questions? They're questions like, do you require sponsorship? Which country do you reside in? So for example, a lot of companies, they only hire within New York or United States. And if you're applying from Europe, they're gonna be like, sorry, we don't have a role for you in Europe, and they'll just automatically reject you there. They're not going to reject you based on your number of years of experience, or maybe you don't have, Figma, you know, specified in your skill set and your resume. That's not the case at all. Yeah, 3 to 4 bullet points. I think adding some images definitely help as well. So here's one big mistake that I made years ago, and I see a lot of designers make nowadays, which is they separate their skill sets into different portfolio pieces. So, for example, for me, what I tried to do was there's a case study where I talk about my design strategy and my design research. And then there's a separate case study where I talk about my designs, my visual designs. And
And you're expecting recruiters to kind of like piece it together. It's like, okay, this person can do strategy. Great. Check box. This person can do a little bit of visual design. Check box. Okay, I've checked all my boxes. Now I'm going to move this person to the next round of interviews. That's not how it works at all. And let me explain why as soon as I finish sniffling. I hope you enjoy those really gross sounds that I've been making. So anyway, why is it important that you combine everything together into a single case study? Is because honestly, and this might be an unfair ask, but many hiring managers and recruiters want to see that you're able to do everything end to end in a single project. And the reasoning for that is because if you try to do visual design in a vacuum, it's a lot easier than trying to do it in the process of shipping a product and managing the strategy, the stakeholder management, and all that. It's very hard to do so. It's similar to how you ever see those, circus performers, like somebody's on a unicycle and they're juggling and they're also like juggling to each other. Uh, that is on a magnitude much harder than somebody who is just riding unicycle or somebody who is just juggling. Combining them together is a completely different skill set. So there are a lot of people out there who can juggle. There are a lot of people out there who can ride a unicycle. There are very few people out there who can ride a unicycle and juggle at the same time. And that's what it takes to be a successful circus performer. You need to combine everything together. And I think for design it's the same. Can you somebody who can just do really good strategy but then not really deliver on visual design unless they really set aside time for that separately, that's a concern because it might mean that they're not able to ship a polished product, right? You do need to understand that in the real world scenario, somebody needs to juggle everything at the same time and make sure the strategy is good and also then ship a really visually appealing product. And be able to ship a visually appealing or make some visually appealing designs and not ship it in the context of a complex strategic overlay is not great. And I think as I speak out loud about this, I'm realizing that I am one of those designers because it's really hard to ship really good visual designs when you're also trying to change the strategy. It's really hard. If I were able to do that, I would say I would be a more senior or a more attractive designer. So that's really the main reason. So anyway, the point is that I see a lot of designers who have really good case studies, but the design in the case study does not look good. And their solution to this is like, okay, well, I hear because and this is a fault of the hiring manager recruiter because they often ask at the end of the interviews, like, well, can you show us some visual design? They feel like, well, we like what you told us, we like your case study, but we don't really like your visual designs. So for you to get this job, can you show us some of your visual designs so we feel comfortable around that? And often designers listen to that and they follow it quite literally. So they throw together a bunch of visuals, like all the random shit they've done over the years that they think looks good. They throw it together into a single case study and then they show it, which is basically what I did here because I'm a fucking moron. So I basically done all the things that I get annoyed about. But anyway, what you want to do is you want to show good visual design in the context of shipping the product from end to end, because good visual design is highly contextual. It's not something that exists in a vacuum. It typically is informed by the strategy, informed by pressures from the other stakeholders, by the pressure on shipping something, getting it out the door, and just not having enough time. And you need to be able to work in that because this is a real world environment. It's like difference between like somebody who can disarm a bomb in a classroom setting, like a fake bomb, and do it well, versus somebody who is disarming a real actual bomb that could potentially, really hurt them or kill them. And I think that's a really big difference. Like ultimately, you are paying for a designer who is operating in a real world environment, just like you're paying somebody to be, you're relying on a bomb diffuser expert, not just somebody who can do it in a classroom and utterly fail in a real world scenario. So anyway, I hope that explains it. So for designers who are not really good visual designers but excellent strategists, should we just career pivot? I'm not like become a recruiter. No, don't be like me. This is one of the more regrettable career decisions I've made in my life, for sure. If you're interested in learning why it was so regrettable, I do have another event on Friday with Louis Rosenfeld and part of the Rosenverse event. It's free. I think it's around like 11 or 12. Just go to Louis Rosenfeld's LinkedIn page and you'll see the link on there. You can sign up for it. And I talk about my failures. It's part of the Failure Friday series where people talk about what they screwed up on in their career. And I'm going to talk about this. So I'll save it for that. Anyway, should we pivot? Yes and no. I think we really should be weighing, is pivoting harder and more work than just simply learning how to do visual design? Because there are a ton of like courses out there that are quite good. And I think at this point, you should really consider that. I think it's becoming quite apparent that visual design and craft and taste are things that are not going away the next year or two. So, it's always a pendulum swing where years ago, research and strategy was super important. That's what, got you the high paying jobs. And I remember all the branding and graphic designers, trying to figure out how they can learn UX and strategy and research so that they can get the UX/UI jobs that paid twice as much. And now we're seeing the opposite because now you have a bunch of UX designers who really don't have high craft. And in order to get a job or get paid more, they need to be considered product designers, or as Duolingo calls them, product experience designers. And obviously, at some point, maybe it'll swing back. We'll go back to product, research and strategy. But that might take years. And during this time, you still need to survive. And you can't just like quit design and go into baking and then come back to design in like 3 years and then, make the same amount of money. It's not going to happen. So the question I really have for people is, should you be learning visual design and like really getting into it? I think the answer right now is kind of yes. I don't see why not. It's in use. What happens if you're using a really ugly design system? Designer had no control over the look/style. Yeah, super unfortunate. That happens all the time. Happened to me as well. I think I would probably try to build something on my own that is visually appealing so I can showcase that skill set. I know it's hard, but that's basically what you have to do now. And maybe you have to make, rework an older portfolio and redo the visual design so you can show people like this is what it should look like if I had more time or if we had a different design system in place. How many projects do you recommend on the open portfolio site? Oh man, I don't understand. This is a legit question. I get asked this all the time, and it actually annoys me sometimes because it's like, really, are we gonna? Is this the most important thing? Sorry, I don't mean to shame you. I ask the same question all the time. I just laugh because it's just such a common question. It's as if, anyway, what's the answer to this? At least 2 or 3. But you don't need it to be too many. It's not like if I cannot see if you're the right candidate or not after 2 or 3 projects, the remaining 4 to 8 is not going to change my mind. Like I'm not going to, it's not like I'm going to look at the first 2. I'm like, it's not a good fit. Let me spend more time and look at the remaining 4 or 5. It's not going to happen like that. I would have a lot of projects only if your career is just that long and that impressive. Otherwise, having more or higher number doesn't really do you any favors in terms of your candidacy. But that's just my opinion. Again, going back to my earlier advice that Amy Miller said, listen to the person that has open roles for you and ignore the rest. It's I don't know if it's like super relevant otherwise. Cool. I am running out of steam. We're about 80 minutes in, so get your questions in before I hop out. But I do want to show this project because this one took me like dozens and dozens of hours. I basically redid the New York City subway map. So if you're not familiar with the New York City subway map, this is what it looks like. It's a giant spaghetti of lines, and I think it's made back in the 70s. It had replaced Massimo Vignelli's seminal Magnus Opus, which I was, really inspired by and really liked. But yeah, this is what it looks like, and it's very squiggly. It's kind of like a half-ass in between of some kind of schematic diagram of the subway system and also a geographic map. So it does neither very well. It's not really accurate or proportionate. Manhattan is actually tiny compared to the Bronx. The Bronx is massive. So if you look at Google Maps, you can see just how much bigger the Bronx is versus Manhattan. Same with Queens. They're all massive. But because the Bronx has relatively fewer or like less condensed lines or stops, they shrunk it. Whereas Manhattan would be, there's just so many trains in Manhattan. It's a central point. So I wanted to redo it. And I spent however many hours to make it, and I tried to fix all the issues I had with it, which was they would combine lines, like multiple trains on a single line, and I split it out because it was confusing how they drew it at times. And yeah, it was definitely a labor of love. I try to follow certain rules that I made up, which is only 45 90-degree angles, and I had overlays of real streets and made sure that they were, in terms of cardinal directions, they were accurate so that you can go east to west or north to south and hit the right stations if you were to walk above ground. And I also wanted a cleaner look. So yeah, this is kind of what it looks like. This is probably one of the hardest part of it, which is a financial district in Manhattan, and it's super congested. It's, ton of different lines in a very small space, and I had to figure out how to diagram that out. And I went through different iterations, try to show some kind of a 45-degree view, and I went back and forth between combining the lines, separating them. God, I spent like so many hours on this, and then I tried to build a mobile app. It's funny how this is, over a decade ago, and I was trying to figure out how I could code it or get a developer to work on it with me. But nowadays, I could probably just, bring up Lovable V0 and try to do it on my own once I design the map. I also wanted to show like when the delays were, what the next stops were, how close the trains were to you at the station where you can transfer to. And I came up with all these fancy diagrams. Looking back, probably silly. This is one of my favorite designs. They still haven't done it on Google Maps, unfortunately, which is show where the exits are for each station and how these exits, like which trains do they correspond to, and also which ones are wheelchair accessible, which ones have elevators, and which direction the station goes into. So I thought this is, a lot of usability stuff thrown in that I really cared about. They still haven't implemented it for Google Maps, unfortunately. And I also talked about the data behind it, how many people don't really speak English or can read English, and how they would use the app, how many visitors they get, and how I would, segment the users and show different information based on who they were, where they were, and how they use the app. So if you're going from familiar origin to a familiar destination, how that would change the user experience, what would be shown to you and all that. So yeah, definitely labor of love, ton of work that went into it. I'm very proud of it, even though it's no longer relevant in any way. But yeah, don't let sentimentality guide you in how you prepare your portfolio. It's not about like how much you like the job or how much you like the work. It's more about, is this a right fit for the company. Now, with that said, I do think passion projects are important because it gives you another dimension as a designer, as a candidate. I think a lot of hiring managers and recruiters do want to know that you have a background in photography, that you used to be a nurse or used to be in the military. Like these are all important things that gives us a better idea of who you are, what kind of, what value you bring to the team, and if there's a culture fit or not. So all really important stuff. Oh, thank you, Aiden. Appreciate that. No, hey, I can't program the app for you. Yeah, this is my friend Vic. And I always ask him to like make shit for me. And he's like, no, I got better shit to do. It's really hard to get developers to work with you because they're just, their skills are very much in demand. It's like, does Vic want to make $300,000 per year or make nothing on a passion project with me? It's a no-brainer. Angela asked, what was this project meant to showcase? Yeah, I guess it's to showcase that. That's a great question. What does it actually showcase? I can do map design. Like how relevant is it for that? I guess it would be relevant if I were applying for a job at Google Maps. That would be a team that I would be really interested in working on. Like I understand how to do map design, I guess. But so a little bit more about me. I think the way I set myself apart from other designers is that I've worked in a in very disparate fields: robotics, crypto, board governance. I do design, like map design and stuff. And my unique value proposition is that I can go into a complete new area, a super complex area, and like learn everything about it in a very short amount of time and just hit the ground running. Even if I don't understand how things really work, I just have a really good feel for it. Like I can trust my gut. And this allows me to just jump into entirely new areas. Like I know I'm confident I can go into AI tomorrow and be like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know how to build for this. I can go into, some kind of a climate change company or sustainability company and be like, okay, I can probably learn how to, work around this. And I think that's a pretty good skill set to have because oftentimes companies and hiring managers can't find the right fit because they cannot find this really niche designer. So if you can't find somebody who has an apples to apples fit, then I'm really the next best person for you. Because while I might not have the exact experience you're looking for, I do have a long documented history of jumping into highly complex niche areas and succeeding in it. So this would be another example of me doing exactly that. And I think that could help me get a job at a place where I'm really interested in this area. But even though I don't have any prior experience in it, I feel confident by showcasing these examples that I can do the work. Yeah, the exits are available for subway station on Google Maps, and it's a game changer. Maybe it's available in New York City by now, because I know Google Maps is pretty standardized. They use GD something, forgot the name for it, but they have like their own. They have their own, not GDPR. Fuck, what is it called? They have their own data ingestion protocol that they share with all the metro systems in the world, and that's how they get data in to show when are the trains coming, where the trains going to, etc. And it's pretty cool. So I think maybe they show that for New York City by now, but years ago they didn't. And I really like the idea because I always ran into this issue where, okay, I know there's a station at 14th Street and 8th Avenue, but I can't find it because it's actually on 13th Street and 8th Avenue. So that would have helped me. And if I had some kind of disability, even if it's temporary, like I'm on crutches, knowing where the elevator is would be super helpful. Which it didn't used to show that. So imagine you're on crutches and you have to walk from one block to the other and go on this wild goose chase to find the elevator. That would suck. How can I position myself as a strong product designer with my experience spans multiple roles, including product owner, intern at a Canadian bank, a design researcher, intern at another bank, and my current role as a service designer in healthcare? Yeah, that's tough. I think I don't have a good answer for you. I think that's gonna be really specific. You would have to like sit down with somebody to really look over your experience, your portfolio, to better position yourself. I don't have a good answer for you, so sorry. My portfolio has 3 case studies from my current experience with a variety of mobile app and web app, which I think are the best. Should I consider having more projects from other experiences? If you have more than 2 or 3, I would really focus on making the 2 or 3 really, really damn good. Again, going back to what I said earlier, if the first 2 or 3 links are projects I look at are not great, I'm not gonna keep clicking more in hopes that the next 4 or 5 are gonna be better. It's just not. That's just not how it works. First 1 or 2 that I look really, really damn good. Like you want when it's good, people spend more time on it. When it's bad, people spend less time on it. It's not like things are bad and people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna invest more into it." No, that's a fallacy right there. Does having your portfolio in Notion versus having a frame make a difference to recruiters or hiring managers? Yeah, it does. I want to say that it doesn't, like it shouldn't, but the reality is that it does. And it's like, it's like saying, does dressing better or more professionally help? And we all can agree logically that the way you dress shouldn't be seen as, professionalism or attractiveness. It shouldn't. Like that shouldn't be an indicator because your work shouldn't be affected by the way you dress. But the reality is that when you go into a corporate environment, especially, the way you are dressed changes how people perceive you. So I think Framer and Notion's kind of like that, unfortunately. Some hiring managers do care if you have a Notion doc versus a bona fide, Framer or self-coded website. I think they tend to be a little bit biased around that, unfortunately. The case study is very detailed. What other details should I elaborate on during portfolio presentation interview? I don't want to come across as a live version of my website. If you caught the opening act of this video session, or just, after this session is done, go on my YouTube page or on the LinkedIn page and rewatch the recording. I talk about how there should be 2 portfolios. One that is a slide deck that is used for your on-site presentation at the end, and then a website portfolio, which is what I'm showing here, that you should be sharing in your job applications and with recruiters so that you can get your interviews. So yeah, it should be 2 different things, ideally. I can't tell if you're making a joke here because I don't remember what I said earlier, but it's probably in reference to what I said. CICD. No, Vic's got it. GTFS. Something transit feed script, general transit feed script or something. So Google GTFS and Google, and you'll be able to read more about the protocol, which is really interesting and a pretty clever way of ingesting data to be used universally. So yeah, we're an hour and 90 minutes in at this point. I am losing my voice and I feel like I've answered most people's questions. I hope this has been really helpful to you folks. Please, let me know if there's any other topics that I can talk about in the future. I hope, this has inspired you to share your portfolios with others and deeply embarrass yourself like I did here, because I'm definitely one of those people who are saying, do as I say, not as I do. I'm a giant lying hypocrite, right? So yeah. Do you have Mateo asked, do you have an example of a case study that impressed you? Yeah, I mean, there are definitely case studies that have impressed me. I don't save them because why don't I save them? That's a good question. I'm lazy, probably, but also I would say that case studies have impressed me for different reasons. And it's all within the context of the designer themselves. Like, if you were to take this impressive case study and then gave it to me and said I made it, it would be less impressive because we evaluate people as a whole, not just in the case study. It's also the years of experience, their background, where they came from, where they worked, and how they talk about themselves. So it's really about people as a whole. And I think I'm not like a big fan of like sharing case studies and saying this is great, everybody should copy this person, because while it might work well for this person, it might not work well for you. And part of the issue that we're facing right now is all the case studies look similar because of boot camps. Boot camps basically somehow convinced even very senior designers like me that portfolios should look a certain way and we should all build around like that. And that's not the case at all. So if I were to share case studies that I think are really strong and really good, I would be very careful in describing like this is really good because of this really specific reason. I wouldn't say everybody copy this format. That's not a good idea in most cases. Thank you so much. Can't see who you are, but appreciate it. And yeah, well, I hope everybody else does it too. Do a live stream, talk about your portfolio, what worked well for you, what didn't. Yeah, I would love it at some point you walk us through some good case studies. Yeah, I could do that, but I don't have them saved. So maybe send me some. Send me something that you think is really great or impressive, and then we can look through it together, maybe. So yeah. Okay. So by the way, I know it's 1:40 right now. It's on Wednesday. I'm hosting an event later at 6:30 in Dumbo, Brooklyn, New York. So if you're a senior designer, an experienced designer, and you happen to be in Brooklyn, hit me up because we are looking for mentors. We have like 40 people coming today, 50-50 split of mentors and mentees. And we have more mentees than mentors, unfortunately. Surprise, surprise. There are a ton of people who are trying to break into the field or who needs mentorship. And if you happen to be in New York City and you're feeling generous tonight and want to help out other mentees and want to hang out with us, please hit me up over LinkedIn and I'll send you the details. So please, looking for more mentors. We're also hosting a ton of events every 2 weeks in Brooklyn and in Queens, New York. They're all in person. We do small drinks, small parties. We don't talk about design that much, or we do, but only in like a commiseration kind of thing. We don't talk about where do you work? Do you have a job for me? We don't do transactional conversations. A lot of fun. We get like 95% people showing up, very few no-shows, and our post-event reviews have been really good feedback. So like 4.8 usually. If you're in the neighborhood, come hang out with us. It's always for a good cause. We're donating our RSVP money to either families who've lost their homes in the LA wildfires or Planned Parenthood. So we pick a different nonprofit each time. And then this Friday, check out Louis Rosenfeld's, the publisher dude. Check out his LinkedIn. I'm doing a Failure Friday call where I talk about all my failures and all the times I screwed up as a design recruiter and all the dumb assumptions I've made. So it'll be fun, and I hope it'll be as embarrassing and vulnerable as this one. And yeah, that's it. So thank you everyone for staying past. We still have like 50 something people, and it was like 100 at one point. So I really appreciate you folks for staying through this entire talk. And if you have any feedback or any ideas for future talks, hit me up. I'm always happy to chat. So take care, everyone. Have a great day and happy hump day. Yeah. Yay. Okay. Goodbye.